This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more.
Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange with me, Arthur Parkinson. This week Sarah is having a week off, but I am joined possibly by the most elegant guest we've ever had on this show yet. And looking at his Instagram and going through his incredible career of both dance and now growing, I'm completely enthralled by Andy Monaghan, who I've followed now for quite a long time on Instagram. And Instagram has become a little bit like a crowded cottage border for me in terms of the amount of people on there gardening and growing and doing cooked flowers and floristry, which is wonderful. But for me, people who put effort into creating the most elegant content that really has heart and depth is something very special to discover. And Andy's Instagram is almost like going rock pooling. There's so many jewels and beautiful, slow elegance. And Andy is a dancer. How on earth he has a career that now includes growing, I'm not quite sure. I don't think this guy ever sleeps, to be honest. But I just thought I'd read what Rachel Detame wrote about Andy in Country Living back in January, which was, like Andy, I trained in ballet and I feel there's a connection between movement, balance and fluidity in dance and working with nature to create expressive yet fleeting beauty. And Andy, that's certainly something that I know everyone will feel from looking at your floral work, and it's so lovely to have you on this episode.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. It's really kind. Thank you. It means a lot.
So you live, I think, in London for a lot of the time, but you've also got land in Hampshire, which I'd love this episode kind of to focus on a little bit. I mean, we could fill countless episodes about you and your dance career, which is just incredible. But I think the land that you're renting, I believe, is so exciting. And for those of you that follow Andy on Instagram, I think you'll be really interested to hear how Andy is managing this piece of land, which was just farmland, wasn't it, when you first started?
Yeah, that's right. So we're Stratford in East London. We've been here for a couple of years and we've got a lovely little garden here that we've tried to kind of cram in as much as possible. And then since January, I've been renting about 3.5 acres in Hampshire, which feels like the biggest jump forwards in terms of kind of managing a space. So it's been, it's a huge learning curve, but I love it. And I think, like you said, the connections between dance and flowers, particularly British grown flowers, and the movement that you can get from growing your own stuff is wonderful. And I think it's one of the reasons that I really love this as an art form. And I think I really view it as an art form and a creative process, as well as something that can be used for celebration and for kind of all these other big milestones that you use flowers for, and that people like to have them for. So it's I feel very lucky to be able to try and balance the two careers. It's tricky and it's a big old negotiation with a diary, but it's I feel really fortunate to be able to kind of pursue this now.
Yeah. With the land, how did you find it? I mean, it's quite a stretch, isn't it, from London to Hampshire?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was really hard. I looked for about a year in London, and councils, some of them are really helpful and really lovely, but, everything's marked for public green space and for development, and it was just really hard to kind of get anywhere. So I knew I had to kind of look a little bit further out. So initially I started looking in Essex, which is kind of the nearest county outside of London to us, but didn't really have much luck, down into Kent. And then eventually through kind of friends of friends and the wonder of Instagram, found this place. And it's just been the biggest kind of blessing. And even though it's far and we're trying to figure out how we're going to balance that between the two of us, and my partner Will's a dancer at the moment, and he's kind of at the peak of his career. So he obviously wants to carry on for as long as he can. He needs to be based in London, so it's how we're going to split it between the two sites, and we're just trying to figure that out. But it's it's a lovely problem to have, and it's the site felt worth the effort of the travel, if that makes sense.
You just got out of the car and was like, this is the plot that I'm gonna. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it needs a lot of love, but it's going to get there, and it's just going to take some time. It's really heavy clay. I think they had a market garden on there probably about 5 years ago, the previous tenants, and then it was turned over to sheep. So it's, it needs some work.
And what was the first work you did?
So I had to put in a deer fence. So that's lovely and high, but that's quite an expense. So that I just had to alter my plan, I think, for the year. I think that's been a massive learning curve, actually, of taking this further from just having a garden and allotment to having a site like this. It's that flexibility of like, okay, actually this thing needs to happen. Oh, that's more money than I'd budgeted for. We have to play with this. And it's being kind of malleable enough to make that work. So yeah, the fencing went in, and then I hedged off about an acre, which is my plan to then work within that acre for a couple of years. I think it's going to take me a while to grow into that. I mean, initially I was looking for a site that was about a quarter of an acre. And ended up finding this one that's 3.5. And I was like, oh my God, this is, amazing to grow into. But Jesus Christ, this is a lot of work.
It's quite a big stage to fill, isn't it, for you?
Big old
suddenly.
Stage, yeah, absolutely.
But you're used to that.
Yeah, definitely. And, I love a challenge and I love opportunity. And I think, I started dancing as a career when I was 22. That's when I graduated from school. And I thought, if I can stay healthy, I'll dance for a really long time and that will be my life. But then, COVID hit and everything stopped and injuries happened. And it was just this kind of thing of the floral design and the growing really came as a second career much sooner than I'd anticipated. But I think because I don't feel ready to leave dancing yet, to try and balance the two is something that I just didn't think I would have the chance to do. So it's like I said before, it's nice to be able to play with the two and see how they inform each other.
Yeah. And this May, I saw on your Instagram, you took homegrown bouquets from the land to the Royal Opera House. And there's the most wonderful video of you holding these gorgeous big bouquets of cow parsley and peonies. I mean, you must have been exposed in your industry to a hell of a lot of flowers being gifted and, that whole thing of, I remember sometimes Sarah used to say when I used to fill her bedroom after a photo shoot at Perch Hill, she'd say, oh, I feel like an opera singer, because her bedroom would be full of vases of flowers. I mean, you must have seen a lot of good and probably very bad, I dare say, flowers that aren't English flowers, that aren't seasonal. Do you think it's changing? And was it a proud moment to take those flowers to the Royal Opera House?
Oh, I mean, immensely proud moment. That building has been a massive part of my life. I used to usher there when I was at ballet school, so I was kind of there in my late teens, and then Will dances there now, and it's been a real kind of stalwart for the last 15 years. So to be able to then take my flowers there to stage door to get presented to ballerinas and dancers that I've watched and admired for years was just like incredible. And then the fact that it's seasonal, the fact that it's been grown by me, if I'm there at the show and it gets presented, sometimes you see their face and they're like, not that I've never seen anything like this before, but this is just so different to what I was expecting. And that's really lovely. Like, as the person who makes it, who can grow it and then arrange it and, package it and everything that goes into it, to see that appreciation and then on such a global stage, I'm so lucky. It's making the most of your opportunities, isn't it?
Definitely. And you must really have learned how to condition flowers, because to pick them and get them up to London, it is an art doing that, isn't it? It's nothing worse than a floppy bit of cow parsley. And I could see how upright and sturdy all those cow parsley stems were. So who taught you, Andy, really the basics of that side of things, or are you self-taught?
It's kind of been a gradual thing over time, I think, because everything started for me with flowers during COVID, because all dance work stopped and, theatres closed, and they were one of the last things to open up. So it was a thing of trying to find something that was a creative outlet that could fulfill all of that. And then I started to learn more about it, and I just thought, oh, well, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe that you can create stuff with this and then that you can grow it. Like, it was fusing the two right from the beginning that I just found brilliant. And then stepping into that world and seeing the people that had kind of pioneered the style that I was naturally drawn to. So kind of Shane Connolly and Sarah and like all of these, brilliant artists, how I view them, seeing that and then seeing how they do it, and then kind of learning a bit on the job with like freelancing with the people or work experience. Or I worked on an amazing flower farm really early on in Walthamstow with a brilliant grower called Tria Cracknell. And she was just like the patience of the saint, because, you rock up and you're like really enthusiastic, but you don't know anything. And just her patience of kind of like, oh yeah, this is how, like, this needs searing, or this, you need to cut this when it's at this stage. And it needs this long to condition before you can really use it. It's fleeting. So, it's only going to do 2 or 3 days. So you need to use that for an event rather than something that's got to last a week. And learning all of that from her was brilliant. And then taking that and then kind of running with it with other people whose work I really loved. And it was just kind of, that's how it's worked over the last 3-4 years. Just meeting people from this incredible community of growers and artists.
So that time of COVID kind of stopped you in your tracks, because you've travelled all over the world normally, don't you, with your dance and with the dance movies that you've done. So without COVID, do you think you'd have gone down the flower route, or would you have just continued liking flowers?
I don't know, I mean, I loved nature. That's always been a massive thing for me. And I think, when we were on these amazing tours around the world, I'd always be the person that would drag a lot of my mates to like the nearest national park, and we'd go and hike up a mountain in flip-flops because we were really unprepared of what we were actually going to do. But I was like, oh, this is great. And like that immersion in the natural world, I think it's quite similar in a way to theatre. Like you're immersed in this world, and it's those two things really resonate with me from those two mediums. And that was always on my radar, but flowers and gardens weren't really. And so I think if COVID hadn't have happened, I don't know if it would have kind of come into focus, but that need to find some kind of form of expression and escapism and beauty. And, I love that you see all sides of a plant within a year. So it comes up and it's new and it's fresh and it's vibrant, and then it'll flower and it's at its peak, and then it'll set seed, and then it will die. And you see all of this really concentrated within a year. And I think that's so incredible. And to be able to work with it in all stages of its life as a designer is something that I really love to do. And you've got to, try and find the right clients who want to embrace that. But I think particularly if you're trying to use color in a different way, kind of foliage as it turns is amazing. And it's this brilliant thing to blend color. And if you can get it at the right time and you can get a week out of it, then I think it's all fair game. Yeah, I love what it can bring.
And do you like the fact that it's similar to dancing, that you're putting all that effort into that climax of show and harvest, just like how you're training to do that dance? Is that kind of the same mental energy that you get from it, or is it kind of just a lower calming thing for you that growing flowers gives you?
I would say it's been both. I think at the start it was definitely the latter, and it was quite calming and it was quite meditative. But now that it's become more of a work thing, that changes the energy, obviously. So it's, that's something else to kind of deal with. And I've been lucky that I've had 2 hobbies that have turned into careers. I started dancing when I was 3, just once a week at a local dance school, and that became a career. And then flowers is becoming a career. And it's a very fortunate place to be, but also you've kind of got to be a bit careful, because it's something that started as a release for you and as an escape from all the other stuff, that when that loses that side of it, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just different. And so then it's kind of learning how to do that. So actually, I've noticed how I feel coming into the different spaces. So the field at Hampshire is very work focused, and it's kind of, things have to be efficient. It has to be beautiful still and inspiring, but it has to be efficient. And then I come to the garden in London, especially if I've not been here for a few days and Will's been working on it, like it's the most relaxing place. And I feel to be able to have those two spaces is really so lucky. Yeah.
We'll go back to the field. So you deer fenced it, which I think most people will agree was the best idea you could have done, because deer and rabbits are just a nightmare in that kind of farmland environment. And you've also, excitedly, I know you've hedged it, which will really make it feel not like a garden, but it will give you a lot of protection, won't it? And also bring in lots of birds, hopefully, that will be part of your organic way of growing. We've just had the wettest winter, which was a nightmare to work on, but it was fantastic, wasn't it, for planting bare roots, just back-to-back bare root planting. And you planted 38 rose varieties, I think, that you've showcased on Instagram. So talk me through this ballet of roses and which ones are keepers and which ones are duds.
I love them. They're my absolute go-to. And I try to shoehorn so many varieties into the garden here in London. And Will likes them, but he's like, they're thorny and I hate pruning them. So can you take them out? And then you can do as many as you want at the land. And I'm like, okay, great. That's fair. I've still managed to keep a few here, so it's all right. But
well done.
Thank you very much. But no, it was kind of the thing that I knew I wanted to put my money into this year, because I knew that they'd be all right on the clay. It felt like, similar to the hedging, actually, it was something that a lot of the growers who I loved and followed and respected and had read all of their stuff, they said, get your hedging in as soon as you can, get your shrubs and like your roses in as soon as you can, because they take a while to kind of build up their root system so that then they can really work for you. So I knew that I wanted to put my money into that. And then it was just, the most brilliant part of the setup was getting to order from all of these lovely wholesalers and making the connections with them and trying to do it as locally as possible and trying to research which varieties were disease resistant but had the best fragrance and a really even spread of color. I mean, that was such a treat because I'm normally so drawn to all the pastels, and to have space and opportunity to deviate into kind of richer colors that I wouldn't normally go for. But I was like, okay, well, I might get a job for that. And, it's going to push me creatively to work with colors that I'm not normally drawn to. Whereas when you've got a small space, you can try and shoehorn as much as you can into it, but you're always going to gravitate towards the palette that you feel suits you the best. Yeah, of course, because, space is limited. Whereas this was the first opportunity that I'd had to really go for it. And so, I think I've done it all in 3s and 5s. And so we'll see how they do these first couple of years. I'm hopeful that they're all pretty good varieties. I was quite thorough with my research, and reading plant books is one of my favorite things to do, So it's, I felt like I was quite thorough with that. And so to be able to then get them in the ground, I mean, it was a little bit of a race against time. Like you said, it was one of the wettest winters. And so it took me a while to get on the land to even cultivate it because it was just ridiculous. And I was like, get my hedging in first and then getting the roses in. It was a little bit tight and it started to get quite warm, but I thought, well, they've got more of a chance of surviving if they're in the ground than if I put them in, a pot and I can't get there because I'm dancing or whatever. So, but when they started to bloom these last kind of 2 months, oh my God, heaven.
And have you been cutting them? You've been ruthless with your cutting?
Yeah. So, I mean, trying to, at least see them to make sure that all the varieties are what they're supposed to be. And, I then get to enjoy them and I get to walk around it all and trying to then be sensible, So like we underplanted the roses in the garden the same time as we planted them and they got completely dwarfed by all the underplanting. And so this year at the field, I've just done the roses and they look a bit sad and bare on their own. But I know that kind of this autumn or next spring, I'll start to underplant them with stuff that's going to help them for health. And that's where podcasts like this have been amazing because I've listened to Josie talk about it.
The salvias.
Yeah, the salvias, the alliums, kind of all of those things that help keep them healthy, but it's beautiful. And then it looks a little bit like you're creating a mini Sissinghurst because you've got Vita's domes and the spires. And I'm like, oh my God, I get to try and make this and be in it. And like, what a way to spend my time, when I'm not dancing. This is just bliss.
And practically wise, so when you get to this land that's been deer fenced and full of gorgeous roses and hedges, where do you go and have a cup of tea and things like that?
So there is a building there. That was one of the reasons why I thought this is too good to pass up as a place. But it needs a little bit of TLC to kind of turn it into the studio, which is what it will become. So it'll become where I can make and all. At the moment, it's all kind of storage for all the tools.
Yes,
but it needs just a little bit of tweaking to make it lovely. Yeah.
So it will become your studio full of vases and
That's the plan. But everything just takes time, and it's just me. So that's also been a thing of just learning how long things take. When I've worked on flower farms, it's always been as part of a team or as at least with another person. So my perception of speed and how long jobs and tasks take was slightly off because then I'm doing it on my own. I'm like, oh, right, I've actually bought, thousands of hedging plants. This is going to take a while.
Yeah.
And so kind of that was all I did for weeks, come rain or shine. I was like, I've got to get them in the ground.
And I think people will really appreciate hearing that because it's just the same situation I think a lot of people have when they take on an allotment, but they've got a job to do and kids to look after. And, I think a lot of people only have a couple of hours to do the garden work. And then you do often have to leave something for a week and it is a trial by fire, whether you come back and it's been eaten or survived. So no, it's exciting, very admirable. So as well as the roses, what are your hopes for other planting on the land to become established?
So I've tried to be as sensible as I can be. And so I've tried to choose things that will work on clay because it's going to take me a while to kind of rectify some of the stuff. It's a little bit acidic and it just needs a little bit more drainage and the compaction is quite bad. So trying to pick shrubs and perennials predominantly that can handle that. And I think I wanted to choose the shrubs and perennials because it's something that if I do get a dance job, I know they're going to be all right. And as long as, I've watered them in well, they've got a really good mulch, they should be fine. And it means that then if I don't use the flowers for that this year, they're benefiting the pollinators and they're just growing and getting stronger, rather than trying to do a lot of annuals, which although is a cheaper way to do it by seed, definitely. And I really thought about it, but I just thought I don't have the guarantee of being able to be there every day because I'm trying to balance these two careers. So it just doesn't seem like a smart choice. And luckily, when I was starting to plan what I was going to plant, Rachel Siegfried brought out her book on perennials, and it was like the best Bible.
A Noah's Ark for you to go into. And yeah,
absolutely. And I've gone and seen her a couple of times at Green and Gorgeous, and she's always, been so patient and answered all my questions. And meeting her and Ash, they're just really inspiring. And so I think, again, it's that thing of kind of what I've seen and learned over the last couple of years, trying to put that into practice with the, the forethought of, I know what I want it to look like in a few years' time. So trying to make it more garden-like so that it's inspirational as well as functional, and seeing my favorite garden designers like Dan Pearson and Sarah Price and like seeing how they do it and trying to make this a space that I love to be in as well as work in, that can also serve the purpose for what it needs to do for work and for clients. It's been trying to kind of marry all of those things together. And I think it's going to take a while to come to fruition, and things won't work and things are going to die, but it's part of it, And I think learning that at a smaller scale in the garden and the allotment that we had were just the, the best training wheels that I could have.
Yeah. So if someone was to take you a bouquet to one of your shows to present to you, what things would you be very happy to have in it?
I mean, roses, obviously, of course, but anything with movement. So I think, the traditionally like spire-shaped flowers like a foxglove or a verbascum, those kind of things I think are really beautiful. Alliums have amazing movement. Anemones, like the Japanese anemones, and then also the ones that you can grow for spring, like they can get amazing curves on them. And then vines and climbers, to be honest, they're kind of my absolute go-tos because they just add this shape that you can't get sometimes from a normal flower. So even like if it's clematis or sweet peas or akebia is amazing because it keeps its foliage and the color and the leaf shape is so interesting. And I think things like that. And then if it's got scent like a honeysuckle, you're like,
Yeah, I love honeysuckle. I've so fallen in love with honeysuckle this year. I think it's the most underestimated cut flower. I didn't see a single one at Chelsea. It was really weird. So hopefully they'll come back into fashion. Yeah, it's interesting. It really is interesting what flowers are completely out of fashion.
Yeah. Oh, I hope it makes a comeback. So I think it's just, and the flowering season, if you get a good mix of varieties, that can just go on and on and on, and you just have this incredible scent. Beautiful.
And we'll mention Will, your wonderful partner, because he does, somehow you must have the most incredible relationship, because he films you, doesn't he, for your social media, and does it so beautifully. I mean, I'm quite lucky to have a really amazing eye of a partner to do all this for you. How did that start? Whose decision was it to do the filming and you let him do what he wanted to do?
Oh,
don't have to answer that. They can edit it out.
No, it's great. No, it's really good. It's a great question. So, I mean, he is one of the most artistic people I've ever met. And I think, as a dancer and an artist in his own right, he's also an amazing ceramicist. He's been doing photography and filming dance for a while, just kind of on his own, just because he loves it as a creative outlet. And so then when I started to work with this, I mean, flowers are just the most photogenic, filmable medium, particularly on film. I think that was a real turning point, kind of seeing the movement that they can get at the lightest breeze. If it's a light flower, it's dancing. And so it seemed like a really natural thing to kind of fuse together. And, running your own business, you're very protective. And I think at the start, it felt like I wanted to keep it as my thing. And then you think, oh, this is really daft. There's so much work to be done. If he is happy to do this and actively wants to help and do it, then that's an amazing thing. So it was just kind of changing my viewpoint. But I mean, I'm lucky that he's there and his eye for it is so good. And you're just trying to capture little bits that show a snapshot of what you're doing. And I think he's really brilliant at that. And his editing is great. And his, he knows me better than anyone. So
so it makes complete sense.
So it makes sense, and I trust him. And it's it's a really fortunate thing to have someone like that.
Very good companion planting ship of you both together.
Absolutely. I mean, what a lovely way to put it. Yeah, of course.
One of the, I remember it was it was a dreadful winter. And I remember seeing a video you put up of a bowl, or was it a bowl? I think you just had a platform, didn't you? And you'd cut blackthorn blossom, I think. And you did it like, it was the most, I just would not have the patience to do this. You did it almost like an amazing 3D mobile spider web of blackthorn. And I just thought, gosh, this guy's brain, it's so elegant to do that. It was like an art installation. You seem to like doing things in bowls, don't you? So do you use a lot of pin holders? Are you using, branches? What do you like to use as your mechanics for these lovely arrangements that you do?
Yeah, definitely pin holders and chicken wire. They're kind of be my two go-tos. But with that one, that was all balance and hope. Those two things in equal measure. I'm trying to be like, I think it still work. And then, when it's for a photo, it's not got to last for days. No. Look, it stood for the rest of the day, which was brilliant. But I think I love that side of it, that you can kind of push it into more of an art installation or a sculpture. And I think approaching it like that is a really lovely way to do it, particularly when you're trying to bring in movement or you're trying to bring in shape. To be able to offer that as an artist is really cool. And it's the stuff that I love. So, the people that I've managed to freelance for this year, so that I can kind of keep learning and keep growing, like Frieda Kim and Wagner Kreusch, like they're just the way their brains work, and you see the experience and how they bring that in. And then you're like, okay, well, how do I feel about that? Do I want to try that technique? Do I want to use that plant in that way? Is there something else that I can take from that and then use it in my own way? And I think it's kind of similar to dance. Like, you're never going to stop learning with this, especially with the growing and the floral design. Like, there's always something that is different, or a new way of doing something. Maybe someone's found something that makes things healthier, or, these got all of these things. And that's, dance is always like that. You always keep going. We have notes every day when we do a big tour. Even if we've been doing the show for a year and a half, we still have notes. And it's just the way that it is, because the show has to grow and it has to get better.
So you have to have a very open mind for both things to grow and flourish and keep growing, not a closed book.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a really good lesson, particularly in gardening, to always have an open mind of things changing.
Definitely. I'm in the grand scheme of things, I'm so new at this still. Like, this is all only been 3-4 years, and the amount to learn seems really vast when you're starting out, and you can feel a bit paralyzed by fear of like, oh, I won't try that because I don't feel like I've got the right site or the right soil or whatever. And I just think, sometimes you just got to give it a go, and you learn so much by things not working out the way you think. And sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's not, and you just know how to do it better next time. And it's that constant process of rolling that's very familiar, that I know and I like, and it feels quite comforting.
So the next spring will be your first full year on the land. So will you be having more bulbs that you're planting this autumn that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I hope so. That's kind of that's the aim, to be able to get all of those in October, November, and see how we go. It feels like a really exciting time, because I knew that I couldn't plant this year until kind of May, June. So I chose things that were going to flower later in the year. So I get to plant all of my spring flowering perennials as well this autumn. So it's kind of like it's like a new wave again, and everything's kind of building and growing, and what survives this year, what makes it through the winter, what doesn't, and all of these kind of factors.
And what bulbs are you looking forward to planting? Anything specific you can give listeners that Andy's looking forward to?
What am I going to do? I'm going to do a lot of alliums.
A lot of alliums.
Yeah, I think amongst the roses, and I want to try, there's so many incredible varieties, there's massive ones like Schubertii?
Yeah, Christophia and Schubertii, yeah.
Biggies, and then you've got ones that look crazy, like Art, which is like...
Oh, yeah, that's like a spray bottle almost. Yeah, I can see you loving that. Yeah.
And they have brilliant movement, and I think the flowering season is quite long if you can be smart with your variety choices. So I think they're going to be one of my biggies. I think Narcissus, to get them in. Again, it's the perennial kind of... So maybe some perennial tulips. Tulips, I absolutely love them, and I think in pots they're just fantastic. But when there's so much to be kind of bought and invested, trying to figure out what's worth kind of the return in these early years, that's just something to factor in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm going to be planting a lot more Narcissi this year than ever before. mainly because I just like the fact they are perennial. Just feels a lot more wholesome, doesn't it? And the fragrance is there, which is so important for cut flowers.
Exactly, and the flowering season, again, if you're good with your varieties, you can have kind of end of February to end of May. Like, it's a really big window. Yeah, look forward to that.
Well, Andy, we will look forward to seeing you with all this bulb bonanza going on next spring, along with wonderful dancers and movies and all sorts of things that you're getting up to. You've got a talk, haven't you, in September, which is when this interview's coming out. So just tell our listeners about that to end on.
Yes, of course. So I am very lucky to be part of the Strawberry Hill House Flower Festival this year. And I'm creating something in one of their rooms. It's this beautiful kind of duck egg blue ornate room. So I'm making something in there, but then I'm also going to do a talk for them on the 15th of September, which is a Sunday, on the two careers of dance and flowers, and kind of maybe a little bit more in depth of how they work together and kind of how I feel they marry. So yeah, 15th September.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Andy, and keep growing and keep dancing. Keep us all inspired with the beauty you're bringing to the world. Thank you so much. It's been such a lovely talk.
Thanks so much, Arthur.
Thanks very much for listening to Arthur and Andy on starting from scratch and the importance of growing for all of our headspaces and general health and well-being. Next week, Arthur's back with me, actually, and we're going to talk about our favourite things in our autumn range. So whether it's narcissus or the odd tulip, or even some edibles, because Arthur is being converted to growing his own food. Isn't that fantastic? Anyway, we'll be chatting about the things that we are definitely planting this autumn to enhance our gardens next spring and summer. So see you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.